Hmm? Ah! Oh.
It's not the tech, it's not the gear that really is what drives me at all. It's doing good things and creating a good life or creating happiness. That is what I'm after. And it's kind of the thing that I knew I could talk about.
Podcast Junkies, episode 117. Welcome back. Hope you enjoyed last week's episode with Katie Kremitzos. I think the energy level on that was off the charts, but I may be biased. My name is Harry Duran. I'm the host of Podcast Junkies. New episodes every week with an amazing array of interesting people from across the podosphere, a term I like to throw around every now and then, even though it probably doesn't even exist. So this week we speak to Michael Murphy on Twitter at Mike Unplugged. He's a self-professed one-man band podcaster and tutorial maker. But I don't think that does him justice. I found him through our little podcasting network, and I remember doing a post about a year ago about podcasts about podcasting, and he popped up. I was really impressed with the fact that he picked a theme for every episode, and he was on point with his artwork, which is no surprise given his interest in photography. So he calls Naples, Florida home, and he's lived an interesting life and tells us about some of his other jobs he's had that have allowed him to be a better communicator and a better listener. And you'd be surprised at the age range of some of the folks who consider themselves fans of the show. So I think you'll get to know him a little bit more. He is a bit introverted, self-professed. It's not something that I'm labeling him as, but I think you'll find that his personality shines through. So I hope you enjoy our conversation and stay tuned at the end of the episode for our retention hashtag. This week's episode is brought to you by Podbean, our newest sponsor. So if you have a need for your own podcast, for an enterprise podcast, or you're looking to do some crowdfunding for your podcast, I highly recommend you give them a shot. The first 30 days are free. Head on over to podbean.com/podcastjunkies. Take a look at all the services they're providing for podcasters to get started with their show. So Mike Murphy, thank you for joining me on Podcast Junkies.
I am excited to be here, Harry.
So Mike, I've been following you obviously as a podcast junkie myself. I tend to keep an eye on people that are doing things in the podcast relating space and this super niche circle of podcasts about podcasting. And as you might imagine, there's always new folks popping up, and some come and some go. But what I've been impressed with lately with you is just your consistency. And I think you mentioned in a recent episode that you started podcasting in 2015. So I'm wondering if we could kick it off by letting me know why, of all topics to pick for a podcast, you decided to pick podcasting itself.
Well, I needed sort of to teach something, and I'm sort of veering away from just podcasting only, or I'm not sure that I ever really declared that was my niche. I'm not a super niche type person, but I bring it all together. I think I try to keep it all within the same path. Like I try to think of the way that all podcasters sort of create content. We all do a lot of things. So I stick to podcasters as my focus, but I also try to cover the things that I know that everybody goes through, like the other technical things that we all do on a daily basis. I happen to love all the other stuff. Like I love doing the tech of all of it. So I try not to limit it to just teaching. When I first started, I think I was trying to stay with just teaching podcasting to kind of put my name out there and kind of become, associated with it because I love it so much. But, I was learning it myself. Like I didn't come on my first episode. I was new just like everybody else. So I have this thing that I think I try to learn things as I'm doing it. And as I'm doing it, I want to share that. So I think that's why I did podcasting, because I knew that I wanted to be good at it. I knew that it was a thing that I was really into. And so I figured I could teach it as I was learning it myself. And that's kind of the way I approach, I think, a lot of things.
I get the sense that you've been a gearhead, for lack of a better term, for a greater part of your life, and maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong. But even just looking at what you have set up now, if you could take just a couple of minutes to walk me through what your current in-studio setup is, because it looks really nice from here.
It's funny because I actually do keep things pretty simple, and I think that might be misunderstood about me a little bit. I'm not a super gearhead in that I don't need to go out and get the latest and greatest. I kind of just like things that work. And I like figuring things out. So I like knowing how things come together, how they work together. And I'll often, in fact, like I had a lot more gear, or just I would pick up stuff as I was building, thought what I wanted to build as a business. And then I find I have too much. I don't like to have too much. So I will get rid of stuff, So I'm not one of those people that collects a lot of gear. I use a Allen & Heath Z10 mixer. I use an SM7B, a Shure microphone, which is I love this microphone. And I have the SM7B plugged into a cloud lifter to give it kind of extra gain, because this is a pretty gain hungry mic. So it allows my mixer not to work as hard. And so then I record directly into a MacBook Pro, into Adobe Audition is where I typically record. I don't do any interviews, so my setup is really simple, so it's really just a matter of getting the sound in. At first, I had backups going. I had the Zoom because everybody said you had to have a backup. And I kind of laughed at myself because, if I screw up, I re-record. I think it's a pretty simple setup. I think you're referring to all my soundproofing behind me as looking elaborate. That's the cool thing.
Were you always into technology? I mean, I remember, if I go back and I try to think of my earliest piece of technology, it was probably a Texas Instruments computer. So I'm wondering, I may be, and obviously that I date myself there, but I'm wondering if you could think back to what your earliest piece of gear was.
I always kind of liked the computer stuff, even back in the day. We were the tech, the really old school. In school, it was, I don't even remember the names of it, but it was the same stuff, the really old computers where we would all gather in one room and try to make some little weird game or something. It was definitely the Texas Instruments type stuff. But I was always into the same stuff. I always liked the Apple and the Silicon Valley stuff, because that started coming up. I felt like I was early on. I was listening to podcasts from day one. I was really into it, and I never knew anyone that was. It was kind of funny. I listened to them from the beginning, and up until recently, it really wasn't common for any of my friends to even know what they were. But I always listened to the tech stuff, anything related to Mac software. I always follow the latest trends.
So I'm wondering, you mentioned that you've been involved in podcasting since day one. What were some of the shows that you were listening to early on?
Definitely anything from Silicon Valley. I loved, John Dvorak comes to mind. Don't really remember which shows, but all the Twitch shows, Merlin Mann, I think. I listened to all the photography, and I was really big into photo focus, and I still listen to some of those. I still listen to Mac Most Now. It's a podcast that's still going on. It's the exact same format.
Do you find that the way you consume podcasts has changed now that you're actually a podcaster yourself?
Yes, I rarely consume them anymore. I feel like my knowledge and consumption has dropped drastically. Do you feel the same way, or is that?
Yeah, I think in the beginning I remember going to NMX, and I had a ton of podcasts on and I was a self-proclaimed podcast junkie, and that's where the show started. And I remember I had probably 50 podcasts, and I would just blaze through them, and I got really good at listening at 2x speed.
I'm a 2xer.
We should get t-shirts that say I'm a 2xer. Yeah. And I just find that's the fastest way to consume. But just lately, I've had to be more discerning, and I find that shows in the past that would interest me, I think it's just a matter of my taste changing, or maybe them not maturing their shows or growing their shows with something more interesting, or keeping up to date, is that I find that shows that I used to listen through all the way through from beginning to end, I've either deleted them, or I know where to skip. I know where to fast forward now to the heart of the shows.
It's funny. I don't like that feeling of feeling like I have to rush through things that I enjoy, or that I know that are, that I used to enjoy. It's sort of on one end, I'm kind of I don't like when I find myself doing that, because I appreciate people taking the, I appreciate the work, especially the people that have been doing it for so long, But on the same respect, I feel like my time now is so limited to like what I can consume and what I can retain and what I want to, that like I'm really stingy about what I'm listening to. And even at 2X, like I feel actually excited when I can get through like a couple podcasts on my bike ride or whatever. I'm like, yes, I'm glad I got them in. Like I feel like I just checked off a major to-do list.
What's interesting, Mike, is sometimes what I think about is, because I'm doing that, I feel that it colors the way that I do my episodes, and it's a reminder for me to be continuously entertaining for my listeners, because I imagine at some point there may be people that are feeling the same way about my show, and I'm assuming people that listen to you on a regular basis. I'm wondering if that comes in, like the way you consume, if you think about that in terms of your own show.
Well, I can tell you, I mean, I don't know if you like your own voice. It's always been a big deal. Not a big deal, but like I don't think I particularly like listening to myself. But I do like listening to myself better in like 1.5 times. Or, it's funny. Like I'm starting to now when I hear a podcast that I accidentally I'm on 1 time speed, I feel like, oh my God, what's wrong with them? So I don't know if that is a sign. I try to keep things quick as it is. I kind of am stingy about 15 minutes is like my goal. I usually go to 17 or 18. So like I try to be. And that's just because that's where I am, or that's where I want to be. But I don't think it affects me the way that I prepare like the content for my show in terms of my listening thing. But I am noticing it more and more. And I'm sort of like, there's certain people I notice them sort of getting into this I don't know, like they're not delivering me as enough content as I need to stay focused on them anymore. And I'm kind of bummed out,
I think what's so interesting is there's so many people entering the podcast game that it's elevating the standards. And I think we're all feeling like every year we need to do something better. And you recently did a recap of 2016, and you look back over your goals for 2016 and 2015. And so you're actually doing it on the air, because you're saying, look, how did I do? How can I become better? Was that something that you actively thought about when you started the show, that you were going to actually measure your progress along the way?
No, and I'm really bad at doing stuff like that. In fact, I think I mentioned that, like, I'm glad I have the podcast, because it's forcing me to do some of the things that I know I should be doing, but I don't, or that I'm not particularly strong at doing. I am really bad at writing down stuff and journaling and all the things that I know will help me. So like having the podcast, it's definitely holding me accountable for a lot of things. Because I feel like if I say something, like I want to have it documented so I can go back. I keep everything really organized, and I use Scrivener to write everything. So like that's helped me sort of just go back. I never would do that on my own. I mean, as much as I would like to. So yeah, the goal thing. And then when I did this past episode, I was sort of like, oh, this is a great technique, Gary. Even if I didn't have the podcast, I hope I could continue to do this, because it is good to look back and say, all right, well, are these things still priorities to me, or did I do it? Or I found that helpful exercise for me, for sure.
What's interesting is that becomes almost like a live journal, and a lot of people probably do this on their own. They use Evernote or Scrivener, like you said, and they make notes to themselves, and no one ever sees them. But in your case, it's there. It's recorded in perpetuity.
Yeah,
and you can. So there's something. Do you notice that there's something different about holding yourself accountable in a public space?
I think so. I'm not any different, to be honest with you, on my podcast as I am, I think, in day to day. Like it's all me, for sure. Yeah, like I feel like I'm careful with my words, or careful what I say, because I feel like I don't really know who I'm affecting, to be honest with you. But I feel like there's somebody who's listening, and I want to make sure that what I'm saying is accurate, true, and I mean it. Like I do. That is important to me, I guess. So yes, I am conscious about what I say, because I want it to ring true.
The other thing that I noticed that I really liked was the fact that from the beginning you decided to theme your episodes, and as you were getting started, because I think you started like in 2015. Yeah. You said about a year after me, and so your episode stood out because you were picking a theme for each one. And I wondered internally, I was wondering, when is he going to run out of words?
Yes, the answer is yes.
So I was like, wow, and then you're up to episode 70, and you're still keeping the theme. But can you talk a little bit about your thought process when you decided to have that as an organizational structure for your episodes?
In short words, they have to fit within a certain thing. There's a lot of things I do, especially, and this has been an exercise of me as I've sort of been on this journey of self-awareness and kind of just trying to do everything, is not overthinking a lot of things like that. Like, that's not something I see people, and I help people. We both help new podcasters a lot. I'm sure you get a lot of questions who really obsess over the little details like that. And I don't do that. Like, I did not obsess over coming up with a theme, or I just kind of did it, like it just came to me. And as a lot of things I do, and I'm really trusting myself. Maybe it's because of time, maybe because I just don't feel like it's something that I want to spend, days or months or whatever doing. But once I did it, I do like consistency, as we touched on. So I just started doing it. I said, well, I might as well stay with it. That's sort of how a lot of my habits come about. I just say, I've done it this many times. I might as well stay with it. So, answered your question. I didn't put a ton of thought to it, but I did like the topic idea. Like, that was something that I was sort of intending on doing, having like a focus for each episode.
Yeah. So is your investment for 2017 a thesaurus?
Possibly. It is funny though how, you interview people, I guess, so your topics are always, moving and dynamic.
Yeah.
But there are days where I'm like, I do not know what next week's show is going to be about. This has probably been going on for weeks now, or months, that every week something pops up. I don't know if it's because the internet's always changing. There's a lot to do with that. And as something comes up, my podcast is about my journey. So if something new happened to me, or I'm doing something, then I always have kind of a topic. But I'm going to be repeating soon, and I'm not sure with how I'm going to deal with that. I'm not sure how to deal with that, to be honest with you.
Well, I think it's just the nature of it, and Ray Ortega comes to mind because he's you probably know him, and he goes deep on gear a lot. But what he does is I think after about a year or two, technology changes so fast. There's an easy way to say this is the new recap of that first topic I had. And now after a year, after 2 years, you're never going to run out of things to talk about, because even if you do pick the same word, it's like that word 2.0.
Yeah.
And you can dive deeper, because this industry and podcasting and all the tools and things that we have available, there's always new stuff on the horizon and new toys we can play with. So I don't get the sense that you're going to run out of toys to play with and things to talk about on the show.
No, there's definitely not. I'm guilty, I think, and people have sort of told this to me, is I move quickly through stuff, or not even gear, like just like the technology. Like, I'm always kind of learning new stuff and moving on. And somebody once told me, like, slow down, or, so like the fact of the matter is, like, I probably should spend a little more time on things that I sort of think, everybody knows the HR 2100 is the standard microphone. Well, not everybody has been in this conversation for the last 2 years, or, so I have to stop myself a lot of times and really remind myself, like, okay, like, I really do need to simplify some of the topics like that, and not assume that people know.
And I think what you do that's really good is you're always keeping, like you said, to your point that you just made, you're always keeping the new listener in mind, because, and the way you tackle the topics is you have a little, it's almost like you have a little bit in there for everyone. You have something for the person who's just listening, so you don't lose them, and then you have something to keep your regular listeners engaged. So I'm wondering what type of feedback you've gotten from people that have found the show and have been consistently listening to you.
It's tricky. It's funny, I think, because a lot of my feedback isn't, I learned so much, or it's not like, your technical stuff is great. It's always like things that I didn't expect. It's like motivational stuff or inspirational stuff, or we just like listening to you, or like it's certain things. I'm sort of like, well, how about all the stuff that I'm teaching, or like it's sometimes I laugh at myself because I get feedback from people who aren't even interested in the topic, and
really,
that's kind of interesting. Which is, I think some of the fault is mine, is that I don't speak. Some of it's good that I do have a broad range of that I speak to different beginners, new people, whatever. And then the other thing is that's tricky is that, you can't be everything to everybody. And I know that's true. So I think if I did just focus on like the beginner podcaster, I probably would have a different result. I'd probably have a different approach. But it's not who I am, or it's not what I want to teach. So yeah, I do. When I'm speaking, like I am looking at somebody, I think I look at the underdog. Like I think I look at that person that's a little bit frustrated, a little bit just down and out. And I try to give that little bit of like encouragement that says, like it's not that tricky. The technical stuff is overwhelming, but it doesn't have to be. And, that's sort of my approach is I try to take this like encouragement type things with the tech, trying to make it seem easy and trying to make it easy to learn. And then
yeah, I think you haven't been afraid to show your growth and your growing pains, warts and all, as you work through your episodes and as you review what you've been doing year over year. And one of the things you talked about in a recent episode was this fear of success. And I think that's something that you keep battling with, about how you're putting yourself out there and then you don't know if you're saying the right thing. So I'm wondering if you could talk through a little bit about that, because I think a lot of podcasters can relate to that, because we don't know if what we're saying is resonating or if it's having an impact.
Yeah, that's a real thing of mine, and I don't understand it. It doesn't make any sense to me, because I've done this with other things, not on purpose, where I say the fear of success. I used to say it was like, people would say fear of failure was common. I have this tendency, as I get close to something that I'm all in on, or to just turn the ship and go somewhere else. And I don't even feel like sad or remorseful oftentimes when I change directions. It's just what I do. And, I kind of beat myself up over that for a long time as this, initially I labeled, everybody would call me a jack of all trades. And now I really don't like that term and I try to stay away from it. But that's the same thing. Like as I get close to the finish line on a lot of things, I lose interest in that direction. So I'll move on. And I think that is the fear of success that I'm referring to, is that, like if I'm going to make it in this business, I have to go all in to get to that, success line, whether it's getting new clients and it's not the thing that motivates me as much as the business part of it is tough for me, I guess. I love the creating, I love the helping, I love the teaching, I love everything about it. And then the money part, the business part is what I guess gives me the roadblock a little bit. So that's what I'm fighting through.
I think a lot of podcasters are challenged with that. They try to figure out how to take something that they're incredibly passionate about, which is the topic of their podcast, and then make a business out of it or make a living out of it. And everyone wants to be Howard Stern, walk into the studio, record, and then walk away, and then magically everything else happens. And I did get a taste of that with here in Los Angeles, because Danny Pena invited me to CBS Radio, if you remember that episode. And it was,
I do.
Yeah, it was amazing to just show up and then walk away, and later on they send you the file.
Some pro does it, and you're like, "Whoa, this is cool."
The other thing that you talked about, which kind of surprised me, is your new interest in yoga.
Would that surprise you? I have some.
Well, no, because it's funny, because I think it was just out of context, because it's like, he always talks about gear.
Yeah. I have like a chronic bad back, and I think I've been stressed like the last couple of years. I'm a pretty easygoing person in general. I'm generally even keeled. I have been putting in a lot of effort. I've been working, I was working full time, doing, the same as everybody does. And I think I just developed this, I have like a posture, bad back thing that's been chronic for years. I've been a graphic designer. I'm always working on computer. So I think it just caught up to me. I'm 47 now, and, it caught up. So yoga was one of those things that has been really on my bucket list forever. I did it like 20 years ago and I loved it. And, I don't know why. I just kept staying away from it. And I finally, I just made the commitment to do it, I'm a healthy person. I exercise, I eat well. Yeah, it was a great fit. Once I found it, I was like, I really took to it. I took to the mental part of it. Is like, it really wasn't a physical thing that I was searching for. Like, it was that whole balance of, if I could do exercise and help my head and, all that, like, I'm all for it. So, and it's been great. It's been really good.
And you're currently in Florida now, right?
Yep. I'm in Naples, Florida.
Has that helped from a either a fitness perspective or just getting out and getting some fresh air and not finding yourself like locked in the studio the whole day?
Where I live is important to me, and I've always lived in places where I'm active, and I've always lived in like active communities, like ski towns, and I choose where I live on purpose. I came here from Colorado, and I probably was way more active there than I was here, but I'm outside in Florida all the time. Even though I am working my butt off, it's kind of like I'm non-negotiable when it comes to like getting outside and doing my exercise and doing things that I enjoy. So that is part of my schedule as much as anything else.
What other time have you had a platform like you have now with podcasting? Have you done this before?
No. I think I can probably say that was the number one reason why I wanted to start a podcast. One, I knew the medium. I mean, I'd been listening to it again since, my iPod 1 or whenever, it first came out. So like I knew podcasting. I'm a super I love audio, music. I've always loved the recording process. So like the audio part was like a big thing for me. I was like, oh, I get to kind of finally learn how to really use audio. And it's just one of those things that I've always liked or been interested in audio. And then I think I started this podcast in my trying to make an online business because I had so much knowledge that I have been self-studying everything for so long, and I was like overwhelmed. Like I wanted to share it. Like I felt like I know I'm a good teacher. Like and all my like working stuff. Like I'm always the person that people come and ask for advice, ask for, how do you do this? Just simple things. And so I just was like, you know what? I really need something to share, and I wanted to do a blog because I'm kind of, I know I can write, but I don't really love the act of writing. And so the podcast made perfect sense for me to just sort of have this platform to teach and just share what I wanted to. So, I mean, same reason a lot of people get into it, I think. But yeah, I think it was as much for me as much as I knew that I could probably, impact people or help people or, teach people. So it was very much important.
And it seems like you went in it with both feet, because not only, I mean, obviously you have the podcast and you do that on a regular basis, but you jumped in on the social media channels because I think you're on Snapchat or Instagram. I get those confused, but I know you were doing that for a while and you're still doing it because I saw you the other day, you were riding your bike somewhere.
I do Instagram.
Instagram, and then and you have the other social media channels. And was that a conscious effort to try to do it the right way and just try to be on all platforms and try to grow the audience?
Yeah. I'm not expecting podcasting to be my business. I look at all of it kind of like just one big body of work. I just want people to know that I'm out there, that I'm teaching stuff and that I know what I'm talking about, or that I'm somebody that might deliver helpful information. Yeah. I wasn't trying to be everywhere, all places. I sort of have been really focused on Instagram. I'm on Twitter because I've always read Twitter. I've never really been active in terms of communicating. I probably should be. I could be a lot better. And Facebook, I didn't even have a Facebook account. I deleted my earlier Facebook account until 2 years ago. I didn't even have a Facebook account. Everyone I knew was on Facebook forever, and I had no interest in it. But I figured, if I was going to do this, I was going to try to do it right. So. And that's what I'm teaching, so I got to do it.
Yeah. And I think what you'll find is that people gravitate towards a platform that they're most comfortable with.
Mm-hmm.
So, some people love Instagram, some people love Facebook. And so I think it's this idea of trying to be everywhere so that you can find people at the destination that they're most comfortable with.
I gravitated to the places that I enjoyed, and I thought I kind of a firm believer if you enjoy it, you're going to attract people that enjoy similar things. I mean, that's sort of my goal, is to attract people that I like and that we share common interests. Or, I have a Pinterest account. I loaded stuff, but I don't hang out on Pinterest, and I should, because it sure seems like a magic place to, yeah. And LinkedIn's another one. I should be at LinkedIn because I need that part of my business more, but it drives me crazy. So
Yeah, at some point it's hard because I started on Pinterest as well, and I've occasionally posted on LinkedIn. But I think you have to pick the one or two platforms where you can go deeper on. And I think once you have that, they always tell you to pick one or two, go in deep, establish a routine there, a rhythm, and a presence, and then at some point you can just layer on another one if it makes sense.
Yeah, Instagram was like an easy fit for me. So.
Well, because you've done a good, really great job at branding, because I don't know how many denim shirts you have, but that's now the Mike.
Is it?
That's now the Mike Murphy Unplugged brand. It's you and the denim shirt. So
and I'm in Florida, so it comes in really handy to have long sleeve shirts.
So when you go to the conferences, you got to wear the shirt, and people are just gonna recognize you with from the logo, because I think from the beginning that's been your podcast cover art. So it's good. You get your face out there. So if this is the first time that you've put yourself out on a public platform, is who in your family is like surprised, or have you had comments from people about taking this direction?
Maybe a little bit. I've always been kind of the quiet one, but I've also been the tech person, or like I've always been the person that people call when their computer's broke or when they're need help getting online. But I think a few might have been surprised, or that I'm not surprised, but like I've never really been the one to be in the limelight. Like I'm more of a behind the scenes type person. It's more, I don't look for recognition. Like I don't seek praise. Like it's not important to me. It never has been. So a lot of this is a stretch for me, because I really don't want to be center of attention. I don't want to be in front of the camera, but like I'm kind of I enjoy it now. Like I don't even care. Like I basically feel like I'm doing the right thing, and I feel good about it, and I'm just doing it because like you have to do it today. Like you have to get in front of the camera if you want to brand yourself online. Like you have no choice. Like I tell that to people, there's friends of mine who want to help with their local business. I'm like, well, if you want to be seen, like, I'm sorry, like you got to step out, you got to do it. So I just took the plunge a little bit. And I do know people have commented that from episode 1 to now, they feel like they can tell, that I've changed, or, that I've improved my, confidence or public nature, social skills, I guess. So
with all the time that you're putting into the episodes, do you make a conscious effort to step away from the gear and from the microphone and from the studio, and I know you mentioned yoga, but are there other things that you do to keep yourself more like well-rounded?
I think I'm always making stuff though. Like I always have a camera in my hand. Like I'm always out shooting a video, or even when I'm like I'm big on going on a bike ride. I walk the beach every night, every morning, every night, and then I do a bike ride. But when I do that, I take my camera, I take my GoPro, or like I'm just always goofing around with making stuff. So, which is kind of what I wanted my podcast to sort of be, is just me experimenting with tools and software and techniques, and then just saying, hey, this works pretty good. I don't even get to share half the stuff I do, because they're like experiment stuff that, and it's just me. So as much as I want to share it, it's kind of like, well, I didn't, it's a lot harder to make behind the scenes than people realize. As much as I want to share, it's like,
yeah. So I think some people think it's just a matter of like, oh, turning on the camera and like, oh, you happen to catch me in my in my studio. But there's a lot of planning, especially when you start mixing in video. But it seems like you've been a camera buff for a while.
Yeah, I mean, I've always been a hobby photographer. The past 9+ years, I've been knee deep. I managed a photography studio here in Naples. So I was we were kind of a high-end photography studio, and I did all the back-end stuff, all the graphics, web, pretty much all the stuff I teach is the stuff that I had to learn. Like it was just me running the studio with the photographer, and I was in heaven. Like you asked what I do in my spare time. Like in my spare time, I was on lynda.com learning and studying, and like I enjoy that. And like I just like to learn stuff. So I think that is my spare time. I think is like that's what I enjoy.
Yeah, I think some people are just lifelong learners. I mean, I always find myself trying to learn new things or deep dive into something. But I think what I've done lately, especially as I'm trying to grow a business around as well, is trying to get the things off my plate where I'm not the expert in,
Hmm.
but I could, if I spent enough time, like, HTML design or doing website stuff, I can do it, but it'll take me, 4 or 5 hours to get something done that I could probably pay someone to do in like 15
Yeah.
minutes. So it's a matter of like figuring out what you're really good at and just doubling down on that and letting the experts take care of the other stuff that they do. It's so easy.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to have that discipline of settling down on something. It's sort of not my easy thing because
Yeah.
I like to do many things. I don't know. I fought it for a long time being like, just pick one and go with it, like I was going to do Adobe Audition. I was going to do something, just one thing, but
Well, I think what's important is, it seems like it's what you're doing is talking through this challenge that you have on the show. And, if, like you said, if people that have been following your journey, they see that, you started off one way and you were struggling with things to focus on. And the fact that you had themes for the year, like launching the podcast, finding your voice, and tackling this fear of success. It's valuable. And I think you've mentioned that you've gotten feedback to that point, but people like to hear other people struggling with the same things they're going through, and if you're working through it in a public forum, I just have to feel that that's going to be providing a lot of value for people.
yeah, I think so. And I think, I'm sort of patient I think in real life, I've never really had like a huge group of friends. Like I've always been popular. I've always been able to go on either side of, popular people, the kids that weren't. But I've never had this like big, massive group of friends. And I think I feel the podcast is naturally doing the same thing. There's a small group of people who are really, I know they're there. Like they always share my stuff or they're always there. And I totally am into it, And then, but I think there's probably people on the periphery that are sort of jumping in and out. And, I think if I stay at it, I'm going to ultimately hear people that I didn't know that I was reaching. And so I take each episode like I have people who are really listening or that it's not that I have this raving group of fans that I know that every time I go, like I really don't know if people are listening. I know, my download numbers, they're not big at all, but like I know they're very steady and they're very consistent. So somebody is showing up week after week, So
Yeah.
and I try to find them, I say, reach out to me, like
Yeah, I've tried. You've probably heard that I've tried as well to get people to make a comment on SpeakPipe. But it's funny because we as podcasters, we know what it's like to ask for feedback and not get it. So I'm conscious of it, and I've been more conscious of it lately. Like friends at a podcast, I'll jump on their SpeakPipe and leave them a comment, or make sure I leave the review if I haven't left the review. And I think we have to walk the walk as well, because we have to do. And imagine, we're as podcasters, we know the importance of it, and yet we still don't do it, or we don't reach out. So imagine people who are just listening casually.
And again, I get hard on myself on that. I mean, I tend to be hard on myself, but I'm noticing. I think really what I'm doing now is really just paying attention to things like that. Like the reciprocation thing is something that like, I just, I feel like I could always do a better job at that. Like on Instagram or wherever, like I really try to go out of my way. Like I feel like, oh man, I haven't commented on their stuff in a while yet. They're showing up on mine every day. Like that to me is, like, I feel like you do have a part to give back in that regards, whether it's leaving a review. I rarely well, that's not true. I do leave my share of reviews if I remember, but.
So speaking about the community, are you making plans to go to the upcoming conferences? There's Podfest in Florida and Podcast Movement, obviously in August.
Yep. Missing Podcast Movement this past summer was like a big bummer for me, and it was something that just was out of my control, but it was like I knew I needed to go there. I wanted to go there. I was really bummed, but I couldn't. So that's that. I went to Podfest last year, and I will be going this year. And I actually I bought a Podcast Movement ticket like right when they went on sale. So like it was sort of like the plans are going to go around Podcast Movement. So
yeah,
Podfest in Orlando though, I think it feels like it's getting a lot of momentum, which is cool.
Yeah.
Chris and Katie are like unbelievable organizers. Like I went last year, I was shy and I'm not great at stuff like that, to be honest with you. But I was like noticeably impressed by how well they had it together. I've been to a bunch of conferences and they're all they're late or they're don't seem put together, but they impress me. So
yeah, I think what you'll notice, and this is something I found from going to Podcast Movement since the first one, they did it as a Kickstarter, and they said, would you think if we put this together, people would go? And we were just dying to just get together. So I remember there was like a core group of us. We were just like, I think I was probably one of the first 10 to 20 people to buy a ticket. So it's been so great to see their growth, but there's just something really fun and intimate about being in a room for 2 to 3 days with your tribe, and everyone that's there is into podcasting. Some now that it's been going on for a few years, are at different levels, but we're all talking about the same language. We're all talking the same language, talking about downloads, talking about shows, sharing each other ideas. And I got to tell you, like every time I leave there, I feel like it could have gone one more extra day. Because
from an outside perspective, like you look like the face of Podcast Movement. Like, I mean, one is noticeable your excitement just in the little bit I've seen of you, but it seems like everybody associates you, probably the yellow shirts too, but as like the face of, which is awesome. I imagine that you acknowledge that it's been it's probably been a big deal for your podcast too, right?
I think what's important, Mike, is to it's for people to sort of push them to get out of their comfort zone. Because I tell people this all the time. When I go there, I try to engage. First of all, I try to find all my previous guests and I try to thank them personally. And obviously, because we do face-to-face, I now have, the benefit of like an hour-long conversation. So when I see you and when I see some of these other folks, there's an immediate, right? Hello, like a recognition. And you just have that you don't get. And that's why I've always wanted to do video from day one. And then, the shirt was an idea I got from actually Michael O'Neill. He went to NMX in 2013, and he was talking about how he did shirts as well. And I was like, oh, that's a great idea. And I just got on board and I went with it. And obviously it's a obnoxiously bright shirt. And I think now it's been a staple. So I'll probably have to do it in Podfest as well, and just come, you got to do an investment, because it's obviously, 50 to I think the first time is 50. Last year I brought like 90 and they're all gone. And I haven't gotten called out on the fact that I haven't gotten my own booth yet.
Well, I think that might be one of those investments that are worth it,
Yeah.
I think my reason for really wanting to go to Podcast Movement, or like the fact that I couldn't go, I knew that I need something like that. Like I need to make face-to-face connections with people who are, either going to help me with my business or give me ideas or inspiration. Like that's something that I'm not craving because I'm not great at events like that, but I absolutely knew that it was something I needed to do. And, and this year, I'm going into Podfest with that kind of new excitement. Like when I went there last time, like I just started, so I didn't know what was going on. And now I'm going in there with a different mindset, and, I'm excited. So
yeah, you're going to go in there as the podcast veteran.
Yeah, it still doesn't seem that I'm a veteran.
Is there anyone in your family that's been just watching what you're doing with the podcast? Is anyone surprised?
No, I don't think so. I mean, my father is an avid listener. He's I have a few people over the age of 75 who listen regularly, and they provide me with the biggest feedback. And they all say, I have no idea what I'm talking about, but this sounded great, or this, it's funny. But I think he was a little surprised. I feel like he's might be learning things about me that he wasn't sure of. Like just my.
Oh wow.
Because I've always been soft spoken. I never been the one that. I come from a family that we don't over communicate about things. We just kind of do things. So I think he's probably been surprised, or it's been like a learning experience on some levels, because I've always been sort of the independent one. I think. Yeah, I have a brother and a sister. Who I think listen occasionally. I know they probably did when I first started off. I'm not sure. I'm not sure they still do. I think they might pretend to occasionally, but
yeah. Well, it's so funny because you think that my wife doesn't really listen to my show, but it's not. The topic doesn't interest her. But I imagine there'd be other there's other things that she is into, and other people that bloggers and stuff that she follows. She's into like handmade crafts and women entrepreneurs. So obviously there'd be shows specifically for that. But I think it's interesting that the podcast has become a way for you and like you said, I thought it was really interesting. Your father just found some things about you that he didn't know, and because you're sharing and you're not thinking that your father's listening, you're just speaking freely, and sometimes you say things, and I think it's really nice, and if it can be used as a vehicle to slightly improve your communications with family, I think that's a great thing as well.
Yeah, I think people are open up on their podcast, or they have that vulnerable sort of thing. It becomes, that's the intimacy of podcasting, I guess, that whether you like it or not. And I knew that when I was doing this podcast, that I was going to be, I wasn't planning on being like therapeutic with it or whatever, but I knew there is a big part of me that is, a helper, and that I want to, it's not the tech, it's not the gear that really is what drives me at all. It's doing good things and, creating a good life or creating happiness. Like, that is what I'm after. And the podcast was sort of the way, and the technology was kind of the thing that I knew I could talk about, but so I think it's a combination of all of it. Like, it's just the things that interest me and the things that I want to do. And if I can help people along the way, then all the more,
I think what I find a lot, and if you've listened to past episodes, you probably know when I ask people what's the most misunderstood thing, so many people have answered the fact that people think that they're an extrovert, but they're not. And the phrase situational extrovert has come up a lot, and I think that's the nature of podcasting, because you have the comfort of being in your own home, but I think it's a great vehicle for showing people that are introverted, that don't like to get out, that don't like to meet people, that there is a way to do that, and podcasting is just one way. But if you hadn't started your show, I don't want to get like all It's a Wonderful Life, but if you if you hadn't started it, I'm sure there's a lot of things that wouldn't have been put into motion. Just even like maybe the conversation with your father, or even the people that have provided you feedback, even the people that have learned from you, or people that just listen to you because they're motivated by the fact that you're trying to make yourself a better person.
Yeah,
I think that's just one of the great things about podcasting. Even people that don't like to interact or not normally extroverted can do that through this medium, which I love.
Yeah, I like that term. I don't know if I learned it from you or on one of your guests, that situational extrovert, but like, I'm definitely an introvert. Like, and people will say, not, I guess there's probably people who might question that. I was a bartender for years. Like, I can handle myself in situations pretty well, like I can get along if I have to, but it's not what motivates me. That's for sure. Like, I'm okay being alone. I don't know if I've ever been really accused of being an extrovert.
Do you have any interesting stories from your bartending days?
Oh, probably tons. I don't know any that really stick out. I did bartend for a long time, and I really enjoyed it. And I think I think I'm really perceptive. I think I'm good with people, or I think I recognize people and I see what people need, or, like, I'm always been this sort of problem solver or solutions guy. And I feel like bartending was a good fit because people came in, they wanted an ear, they wanted something, they needed something, and I could pick up on what they needed quickly. And I think they liked that because I was very nonchalant about it, but I just sort of could read where people wanted. And I feel like that's the vibe I want my whole business and podcast, and whether I do consulting, I'm still working, where I'm going with everything, but I know there's something in there. And I know that's the reason I love bartending, is the same reason I sort of find myself now having this need to teach people and to interact with people like that. So,
yeah, there's an aspect of a really good bartender where he or she is just knows how to listen, knows when to approach someone. And, there's some people who'd probably go to a bar because they don't want to talk to anyone.
Yeah.
and then there's people that really are just waiting for the bartender or somebody to sit up next to them so they can tell them, how crappy their day was.
Yeah. I trained a lot of people, and I always said, like, it's probably like it's like the gear part of podcasting. I made this connection that making the drinks and all, like that's the easy part. It's like understanding when people want you to just get away, or when people want you to joke with them, or when people look sad. Like pick up on that and trust it. That was something that I just did, and I didn't know it at the time. I didn't know that what it. I think this journey, this online, the podcasting, talking things through, has helped me sort of say, oh yeah, I've always done that. I never paid attention to anything that I did. Like my self-awareness was zip, prior. I just didn't pay attention to what I did. But now I am. I'm like, oh yeah, I've always done that. So.
Yeah, it's funny how some of that stuff always comes back around. Like this, there's like a common thread in skills and in the jobs you've had or the interactions you've had with people. I think sometimes you need to step back for people to point it out to you. Like, oh, you've always been like that, Mike. And you're like, oh, I hadn't noticed. What have you changed your mind about recently?
Recently, that I actually thought I was going to go all in on podcast production and editing and doing the full service podcast production because I thought it would be a perfect fit for me. I changed my mind on it. I had the whole thing written up and I started doing it, and I realized it was not providing me with the satisfaction that I wanted. I just knew that I just cut my losses. I said, you know what? I don't even want to go down there. I know I could do it. I thought it was going to be a good fit. I tried it, and right away I recognized it. So I said, I put on the brakes.
I think it's called the sunk cost fallacy. They figure, well, I've already put, a couple of $1,000s into this, and I've learned a lot, and maybe I've signed up 1 or 2 clients, and they feel like they have to move forward with it. I did it with a productivity conference that I thought I was going to launch, and spent $2,000, and I did Facebook ads, and I had the speakers lined up, and nobody was buying tickets. I said, that's probably, cut my losses and just live and learn. And I think, a lot of times in entrepreneurial circles, you hear this idea of fail fast and fail often. So you realize what you're good at, what you're not, and really move on to the thing that really makes you happy, which it sounds like you did.
Yeah. I mean, I'm still working on it, to be honest with you, but I am really, really committed to listening to my internal. I know that I'm going to sacrifice. I know I'm going to do things that I don't love, but I'm trying to eliminate the things that I do have control over, I guess. So
one of the new projects you are working on is Podcaster Toolkit. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, that's like one of those things that I really want to develop. It's a little bit slow off the gate. It's basically most people come to me for, what do I use for this? It doesn't matter if it's a new Apple gadget. I've always been that person, like, hey, what can you do this? What can you do this? And the fact of the matter is, like, I forget a lot of the stuff that I know, that I teach, that I do. So this Podcaster Toolkit was really just a website to try to put all the stuff together. I know there's probably a lot of resource sites out there, and but it was really trying to pull all the stuff that I feel like I know, that I teach, that I do, and that podcasters, when they are starting out, or online businesses when they're starting out, I kind of lump them together. I lump the podcasters and the content creators in the same camp, but because I know you're gonna go to Medium, you're gonna blog, you're gonna do other things. So I'm just trying to make this one site a very one-stop shop for podcasters, but do it in a way that is not just a list of gear and list of products, but I would like to develop it into a more of a blog type situation. And I would ultimately like, if I could make a living producing content, like that actually would be a goal. That is a goal of mine. I would like to be able to generate something that I could work on and create and do and make a living from it without having to nickel and dime freelance charges. That's not what I'm trying to do.
I still think, everyone says, podcasting is not new. There's people that have been doing it for 10 years, but I do think there are waves of interest in people coming on board. And I see it with my business, people are discovering it. This new term for the new generation is apparently digital natives and they're, really gravitating toward podcasting. They all want to start one. So I think at the point that you're at, you're heading into your 3rd year. Mm-hmm. And you can just see, and people just look at your back catalog, that you've been consistent with this, and you're providing reliable information on a regular basis. So I think it's just a matter of time, and you probably know this already, but you have to stay at it, and you can't give up. And I think there's room for everyone here. I think people like to think, well, another resource for podcasters, like who's gonna listen to it or who's gonna follow it. But I think you're going to gravitate, your audience is going to gravitate towards you, and you're going to get the people who like you, your style, and the type of information that you provide. And I think the marriage of your podcast with what you're doing, Podcaster Toolkit, I think is going to be good. So I think, I'm putting out the good vibes. And
that was back to our question of the theme show. I guess I did have a long-term goal. I knew that I wanted to have evergreen content for the most part. So I have been very careful about not so much lately. I've added dates and stuff, but I knew that by keeping my topics they're very dense. Like every one of my podcast topics could be 5 blog posts. Like if you look at, I follow Gary Vee, like he could chop up one of my podcast episodes into probably years worth of stuff, so I know that I have a ton of stuff. And that was sort of the Podcaster Toolkit. I was like, you have 70 episodes with hundreds of articles or, however many that I just need to dive in and organize it and just start throwing it up there. So that was a conscious effort though, that to keep it as evergreen as possible. Technologies change, but that was a conscious thought, I guess.
Yeah. And I know one of your goals is to get a book on Amazon and you probably, you already have it. I mean, I went early with my first 25 episodes, and I had this dream. I was like, every 25, I'm just going to put an ebook out. It's only been the first one. Ray Ortega in one of our interviews talked about podcasting as like being around the podcast campfire, and that's what I called it. And it's an ebook, and it's out there, and it's my first. I am working on a new book, but that's my first foray into Amazon. So
were you proud when you did it?
Yeah, it was a bit of work, and I paid someone to help me do the editing of the content. She listened to the episodes, and she sort of put it into this cohesive format where each chapter was a theme, and then she pulled the snippets of the interviews that talked about that theme, which
that's nice.
I was like, wow, this is great. I'll do. And then I reached out to her when I was ready for the next round. She's like, no, I don't do that anymore. Just
you scarred her.
She's like, I think, well, what she quoted me at, and then and then relative to the amount of work she did, I think she realized this is a lot more than I thought it would be. So,
yes, I think that happens.
But I think if you had to pick something you're excited about for 2017, I know you talked about a couple of themes on your show, but anything that comes to mind that's something you want to focus on?
I've been really conscious about trying to simplify things. Like I really, really want to I want to have a really focused sort of plan. Like I'm creating content, like I'm making stuff constantly. So, but a lot of it has been this sort of warm up, this sort of practice, this sort of consistency thing, but I really want to create content like the book or like a course or a class. And I don't want a course like the traditional $4.97 class. Like I really want to have a signature product that I can sort of call my own and that people can take, and that they can, I'm not looking to gouge, but I would like something that, can maybe make me a living or make me something so I can continue to make stuff and do stuff and teach people. So I am excited about creating something, and I'm, working on that now, trying to get it done in the early stage rather than waiting until December and saying, no, my goal's coming up. But yeah, so I see 2 products is my real goal for this year. And if I can get 2 of them done, I'm not expecting them to save me or, send me to the super success land. But I am focused on that. And I'm sort of stripping away the clutter, I guess. And
have you seen the Netflix documentary, The Minimalists?
I have.
Yeah, I thought that was really interesting.
And I like that. I think I've always had minimalism nature. I've never had much stuff. And in fact, I have, like you're talking about the gear, like having too much gear actually makes me crazy. Like having too much stuff around is not my thing. I do want to adopt some of that because I actually believe it's true. It helps me.
Yeah. Like
before this interview, I cleared, I keep everything, I'm so much more focused when I have nothing around me, that's important to me. So
I think it's important because we can get into the habit, especially people like us that are need some amount of gear to do our jobs.
Yeah.
But we get shiny object syndrome, and we feel like we need the next new toy. And I think a movie like that is really helpful. And I think for my business, the word in 2017 is scale. But I think personally, I think it's maybe the opposite of that, scale down, and just going through books and closets and, like you said, cables. I have so many cables, adapters.
And the worst thing is, like, I'll end up buying a new cable because I don't know where the one. I know I got 4 of them, but I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to order it, and it's a joke.
Yeah, and I think there's something to be said for living a simple life and purposely living in a small house or small apartment. So you don't, I think people just buy houses so they can just put more stuff in it, and that speaks to a bigger problem in this world. But
I live in a small house, and I mean, my most of my days early on were living in I never had much stuff. Like, that was always important. I like to move around, and I like to go places. So I feel like I have too much since I started my podcast and the whole video stuff. Like, I was accumulating things because I wanted to have a production. Like, I wanted to have it all covered. The fact of the matter is, like, you can do so much now with just your phone that, like, I'm finding myself, like, the reason I love Instagram Live and Facebook Live is because you just hit record. Like, I love that freedom as much as all the gear is. Like, I love being able to keep it simple like that.
Well, that's a great place to wrap up. Thanks for your time, Mike. I really enjoyed our conversation, getting to know you a little bit more, and hopefully the listeners got to know a little bit more about introverted Mike Murphy. So the website is mikemurphy.co. And I think you're pretty active in, like you said, Instagram and Facebook, so people can follow you there, and on Twitter as well.
Mm-hmm.
Is it Mike
Unplugged on Twitter, and Instagram?
Okay. Well, thanks again for your time, and I look forward to catching up with you in Florida as well.
Yes, I look forward to it as well. Thanks, Harry.
Hope you enjoyed that conversation. And like I asked, or like the question that I asked at the beginning was whether you feel like you got to know him a little bit better, which is always my intention. And each one's different, and everyone has its own character. And I hope that shines through in our conversations. I try to bring out things that I think are of interest to me. And I just really love the fact that Mike has been so consistent over the years. And you can just tell from his dedication to coming up with a theme for every show, and the effort he puts into his artwork, and he just the ability to try new platforms, and whether he succeeds or not, he's very transparent with it. And that's something that I think any podcaster can learn from. So I'm glad I had a chance to get to know him a little bit better. So next week, we have a conversation with Sean Henninger. We'll find out next week if one of those is a correct pronunciation of the language of bromance. We connected at Podcast Movement, and been playing email/Twitter tag. And we didn't get to chat too much, so it'd be interesting. I'm going to dive a little bit deeper about their reasons and impetus for starting the podcast. So that should be fun. We are a member of Podcastica. Head on over to podcastica.com. Have some potential one potential new show in the works, and getting some work redone on the website. So stay tuned for that. That's going to be some good exposure for the shows that are in the network. And check that out if you need some inspiration for shows to listen to. Music is provided by Cedar and Soil. Check out cedarsoil.com. Don't forget to visit podbean.com/podcastjunkies. If you're thinking of starting a podcast or looking for a great home for your show, don't forget you'll get 1 month free if you sign up with this special URL, and you can try all of Podbean's great hosting features. Podbean.com/podcastjunkies. The retention hashtag for this episode is bartender Mike, #bartender Mike. And again, tag me at podcast_junkies and Mike at Mike Unplugged. So take care, guys. I love you for the support. As always, looking for feedback. I'm going to run the SpeakPipe call to action for a couple more weeks. Head on over to podcastjunkies.com. On the right-hand side, there's a tab for sending us a voicemail, and you can just leave a quick recording, and I'd love to play one at the end of this episode. See you soon.